Polk right here in Dallas, Texas. And it is such a privilege and a blessing to be with you today. God is so good to us as usual, and I don't take him for granted. I am so thankful that he has blessed me to come to you through Ustream.com and Ustream.tv another day. And this is it's 3 minutes after 3 right now. So we're going on with the webcast, and you can reach me at 214-943-9723. You can go to my website, shirleympolk.org. You can also call me at 214-943-9723. We're going back into what we were talking about yesterday is coping with grief. And we were going into number 2. We talked about coping with the breakup, and we went into that. We went into triggers, we went into different things, and now we're going into the second part of coping with grief. And it says coping with grief and loss tip. And we're on number 2, take care of yourself. And I was so excited about coming back on and continuing this today. I am just so excited about it because it's such good information. It's just so much good information, and so many people need this. And if whether you're in a breakup, and whether you have a loved one has transitioned from mortality to immortality. I don't like to say you've lost someone, but by me reading someone else's material, you'll hear the word lost or loss in here. Okay, so this is what someone else wrote, but I found this at helpguide.org. Help, HELPGUIDE .org. Okay, coping with grief and loss tip. This is part 2 of the coping with grief and loss. Okay, take care of yourself. When you're grieving, it's more important than ever to take care of yourself. The stress of a major loss can quickly deplete your energy and emotional reserves. Looking after your physical and emotional needs will help you get through this difficult time. So, this will help you get through. Face your feelings. Here's the first bullet. You can try to suppress your grief, but you can't avoid it forever. In order to heal, you have to acknowledge the pain. Trying to avoid feelings of sadness and loss only prolongs the grieving process. Unresolved grief can also lead to complications such as depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and health problems. Okay? Express your feelings in a tangible or creative way. Write about your loss in a journal. If you've lost a loved one, write a letter saying the things you never got to say. Make a scrapbook or photo album celebrating the person's life. Or get involved in a cause or organization that was important to him or her. The next bullet, look after your physical health. Remember, I mentioned this yesterday. Look after your physical health. The mind and body are connected. When you feel good physically, you'll also feel better emotionally. Combat stress and fatigue by getting enough sleep, eating right, and exercising. Don't use alcohol or drugs to numb the pain of grief or lift the mood artificially. Don't do that, okay? The next bullet, don't let anyone tell you how to feel, and don't tell yourself how to feel either. This is very important. Don't let anyone tell you how to feel, and don't tell yourself how to feel either. Your grief, your grief is your own. And no one else can tell you when it's time to move on. I went over this yesterday. When it's time to move on or get over it. Let yourself feel whatever you feel without embarrassment or judgment. It's okay to be angry, to yell at the heavens, to cry or not to cry. It's also okay to laugh, to find moments of joy, and to let go when you're ready. All right, oh wow, this all just agrees with what I said yesterday. Plan ahead the grief triggers. So we know we have triggers, and I think I mentioned that yesterday also. I think anniversaries, holidays, and milestones can reawaken memories and feelings. Be prepared for an emotional wallop and know that it's completely normal. If you're sharing a holiday or life cycle event with other relatives, talk to them ahead of time about their expectations and agree on strategies to honor the person you loved. Now, using social media to support, okay? Memorial pages on Facebook and other social media sites have become popular ways to inform a wide audience of a loved one's passing and to reach out for support, as well as knowing you to impart practical information such as funeral plans. These pages allow friends and loved ones to post their own tributes or condolences. Reading such messages can often provide some comfort for those grieving the loss. Now, of course, posting sensitive content on social media has its risks also. Okay, memorial pages are often open to anyone with a Facebook page or account. Now, this may encourage people who hardly knew the deceased. Now, listen, this may encourage people who hardly knew the deceased to post well meaning but inappropriate comments or advice. Worse memorial, worse, comma, excuse me, I'll slow down. Memorial pages can also attract internet trolls. There have been many well publicized cases of strangers posting cruel or abusive messages on Facebook memorial pages. It's always somebody out there to act uncivilized, okay? Now, to gain some protection, you can opt to create a closed group on Facebook rather than a public group or a public page, which means people have to be approved by a group member before they can access the memorial. It's also important to remember that while social media can be a useful tool for reaching out to others, it can't replace the face to face connection and support you need at this time. It cannot replace the face to face, okay? When grief doesn't go away, it's normal to feel sad or angry following a loss. That's normal, okay? We mentioned that yesterday also. But as time passes, these emotions should become less intense as you accept the loss and start to move forward. If you aren't feeling better over time or your grief is getting worse, it may be a sign that your grief has developed into a more serious problem, such as a complicated grief or major depression. Now we're going into complicated grief and talk a little bit about that. Okay, excuse me. The sadness of losing someone you love never goes away completely, but it should not remain center stage. If the pain of the loss is so constant and severe that it keeps you from resuming your life, you may be suffering from a condition known as complicated grief. The condition is complicated grief, okay? Complicated grief is like being stuck in an intense state of mourning. You may have trouble accepting the death long after it has occurred, or be so preoccupied with the person who died that it disrupts your daily routine and undermines your other relationships. Now, symptoms of complicated grief: intense longing and yearning for the deceased, intrusive thoughts or images of your loved one, denial of the death or sense of disbelief, imagining that your loved one is alive, searching for the person in familiar places, avoiding things that remind you of your loved one, extreme anger or bitterness over the loss, feeling that life is empty or meaningless. So, those are symptoms of grief, complicated grief. Now we go to the difference between grief and depression. Distinguishing between grief and clinical depression isn't always easy as they share many symptoms, but there are ways to tell the difference. Remember, grief can be a roller coaster. It involves a wide variety of emotions and a mix of good and bad days. Even when you're in the middle of the grieving process, you will have moments of pleasure or happiness. With depression, on the other hand, the feelings of emptiness and despair are constant. Other symptoms that suggest depression, not just grief, okay? Intense, pervasive sense of guilt, thoughts of suicide or preoccupation with dying, feelings of hopelessness or worthlessness, slow speech and body movements, inability to function at work, home, and or at school, seeing or hearing things that aren't there, seeing or hearing things that are not there. That's a sign of clinical depression. Can antidepressants help grief? As a general rule, normal grief does not warrant the use of antidepressants. While medication may relieve some of the symptoms of grief, it cannot treat the cause, which is the loss itself. Furthermore, by numbing the pain that must be worked through eventually, antidepressants delay the mourning process. When to seek professional help for grief. If you recognize any of the above symptoms of complicated grief or clinical depression, talk to a mental health professional right away. Left untreated, complicated grief and depression can lead to significant emotional damage, life threatening health problems, and even suicide. But treatment can help you get better. Treatment can help you get better. And I want to put a plug in there. I'm a grief counselor also, okay? So you can call me, 214-943-9723. You can email me at the point of view one. That's the point of view one. That's the number one at yahoo.com, okay? You can even contact me through my website, shirleympolik.org. Contact a grief counselor or professional therapist if you feel like life isn't worth living, wish you had died with your loved one, blame yourself for the loss of or for failing to prevent it, feeling numb and disconnected from others for more than a few weeks, are having difficulty trusting others since your loss, are unable to perform your normal daily activities. And there's more help for coping with grief and loss. And now, let me get to this: supporting a grieving person. Everybody is not a good support for a grieving person, okay? So we're going to go through supporting a grieving person. And let me get to that page, okay? Helping others through grief, loss, and bereavement. This is helpguide.org. Helpguide.org. Helping others through grief, loss, and bereavement. It's often hard to know what to say or do when someone you care about is grieving. You may be afraid of intruding, saying the wrong thing, or making a person feel even worse. Or maybe you feel there's little you can do to make things better. While you can't take away the pain of the loss, You can provide much needed comfort and support. There are many ways to help a grieving friend or family member, starting with letting the person know your care, or know you care, excuse me, okay? Now, what you need to know about bereavement and grief. What you need to know about bereavement and grief. The death of a loved one is one of life's most difficult experiences. Yes. The bereaved struggle with many intense and frightening emotions, including depression, anger, and guilt. Often he or she feels isolated and alone in his or her grief, but having someone to lean on can help him or her through the grieving process. Don't let discomfort prevent you from reaching out to someone grieving. Don't let discomfort prevent you from reaching out to the person, okay? Now, more than ever, your support is needed. You might not know exactly what to say or what to do, but that's okay. You don't need to have answers to give advice. The most important thing you can do for a grieving person is to simply be there. Your support and caring presence will help him or her cope with the pain and begin to heal. Now, understanding the grieving process. The better your understanding of grief and how it is healed, the better equipped you'll be to help a bereaved friend or family member. There is no right or wrong way to grieve. Remember this, there is no right or wrong way to grieve. Grief does not always unfold in orderly, predictable stages. It can be an emotional roller coaster with unpredictable highs, lows, and setbacks. Everyone grieves differently, so avoid telling the bereaved what he or she should be feeling or doing. Grief may involve extreme emotions and behaviors. Feelings of guilt, anger, despair, and fear are common. A grieving person may yell to the heavens, obsess about the death, lash out at loved ones, or cry for hours on end. The bereaved need reassurance that what he or she feels is normal. Don't judge them or take his or her grief reactions personally. There is no set time for grieving. Oh, did we talk about this yesterday? This was mentioned yesterday. There is no set timetable for grieving. For many people, recovery after bereavement takes 18 to 24 months, but for others, the grieving process may be longer or shorter. Don't pressure the bereaved to move on or make them feel like they've been grieving too long. This can actually slow the healing process. What to say to someone who has lost a loved one, okay? It is a common it is common to feel awkward when trying to comfort someone who is grieving. Many people do not know what to say. The following are guidelines or suggestions to use as a guide. Acknowledge the situation. Example, I heard your blank died. Use the word died, okay? That will show that you are more open to talk about how the person really feels. All right. Express your concern. Example, I'm sorry to hear that this happened to you. Next, be genuine in your communication and don't hide your feelings. Example, I'm not sure what to say, but I want you to know I care. Next, offer your support. Example, tell me what I can do for you. Next, ask how he or she feels and don't assume you know how the bereaved person feels on any given day. And this also came from the American Cancer Society. Helping a grieving person, tip number one. Helping a grieving person. Let me look at my time. It's 3:22. Almost everyone worries about what to say to a grieving person, but knowing how to listen is much more important. Oftentimes, well-meaning people avoid talking about death, about the death, or mentioning the deceased person, but the bereaved need to feel that his or her loss is acknowledged. It is not too terrible to talk about, and his or her loved one won't be forgotten. While you should never try to force someone to open up, it's important to let the bereaved know he or she has permission to talk about the loss. Talk candidly about the person who died and don't steer away from the subject if the deceased name comes up. When it seems appropriate, ask sensitive questions without being nosy that invite the grieving person to openly express his or her feelings. Try simply asking, "Do you feel like talking?" Just a simple question. Do you feel like talking? The first bullet is accept and acknowledge all feelings. Let the grieving person know that it's okay to cry in front of you, to get angry, or to break down. Don't try to reason with him or her over how he or she should or shouldn't feel. The bereaved should feel free to express his or her feelings without fear of judgment, argument, or criticism. Be willing to sit in silence. Don't press if the grieving person doesn't feel like talking. You can offer comfort and support with your silent presence. If you can't think of something you say or to say, just offer eye contact, a squeeze of the hand, or a reassuring hug. Let the bereaved talk about how his or her loved one died. People who are grieving may need to tell the story over and over again, sometimes in minute detail. Be patient. Repeating the story is a way of processing and accepting the death. With each retelling, the pain lessens. And you know, that is so true because I think back and I think about how I talked about Elder Davis and the day that he died and how I knew that he was dying, the process that we went through and all of that. And I had talked about it more than once. And so now I see that there was really no harm, but some people don't know that it's not any harm in talking. So sometimes you wonder if you said it too much. But anyway, I know I went through this where I had to talk about it and go through the details, okay, about what I read through the hospice in the hospice material and how I knew that his end was coming by his legs, the feeling of his legs, and how his legs were getting cooler, his body was cooling off and going all the way down to his feet. All of that. I did talk about that. Okay, now let me go on. Offer comfort and reassurance without minimizing the loss. Tell the bereaved that what he or she is feeling is okay. If you've gone through a similar loss, share your own experience if you think it would help. However, don't give unsolicited advice, claim to know what the person is feeling, or compare your grief to his or hers. I remember and I believe, I know uh, when Daddy died, this lady, I know what you're going through. I know what you're going through. And I'm thinking, you don't know what I'm going through. You know, that was my daddy. And I was at the point where somebody would say, I'm sorry about, the loss of your dad. And I would say, don't, I would say in my mind, don't say that. This is what I would be thinking. Don't say that. My daddy is not dead. So I was one of these persons who didn't want to acknowledge the fact that daddy had died. And, we go through different stages. We think different things. And that's one thing I would think in my mind. Don't say that. My daddy's not dead. Okay, but he was, okay? Offer comfort and reassurance without minimizing the loss. Okay, I just did that. Now, comments to avoid when comforting the bereaved. Everybody listen. I know how you feel. Okay, I just talked about that, didn't I? No one can, I'll put it like this. I want to say no one can ever, but the writer is saying one can never know how another may feel. You could instead ask your friend to tell you how he or she feels. Then, here's another thing to avoid. It's a part of God's plan. This phrase can make people angry, and they often respond with, "What plan? Nobody told me about any plan." Okay, here's another one. Look at what you have to be thankful for. These are things to avoid saying, okay? They know they have things to be thankful for, but right now they are not important, okay? Here's a he's in a better place now. We know that's one that people say quite often, okay? The bereaved may or may not believe this. Keep your beliefs to yourself unless asked. Okay? Now, here's another saying that should not be said. Okay? This is behind you now. It's time to get on with your life. You know, I talked a little bit about this yesterday also. Sometimes the bereaved are resistant to getting on with because they feel this means forgetting his or her loved one. In addition, moving on is easier said than done. Grief has a mind of its own and works at its own pace, believe me. And for each person, it is different. Okay? Now, statements, and each time, and for each individual that is yet remaining alive, is different. And also, for each person that's close to you in your life, the experience you have of each one of those people's death is different from the other. You know, each death is different, okay? And you have some different feelings from each death. Now, this came from the American Hospice Foundation or what not to say. Okay. I am going to sign off now. Tomorrow I will continue with this helping a grieving person tip. Number 2, offer practical assistance. So we'll go, God willing, with that tomorrow, and also tomorrow after the broadcast. Depending on if I go 30 minutes, it'll be 3:30, about 3:30 when Greater Gospel Temple comes on right behind the point of view with Shirley Polk. Okay, God bless you. I love you. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a privilege and an honor to come before you right here on Ustream.tv and Ustream.com. God is so good. I love him with all my heart, mind, body, and soul. I thank him for everything that he has done for me and given me the strength to make this daily journey. And I thank him for you too. God bless you over and over. Today will probably be the last day that I'll have to deal with this. Because, I've told you over and over again that I did drop my tablet and I cracked the screen and it hurt my feelings so, okay? But I would probably won't have to deal with this tomorrow because I believe the Lord's going to do something special for me. So God bless you over and over. Remember, 214-943-9723 is the number. The point of view with the point of view one at yahoo.com is the email address. You can also reach me through my website, which is shirleympolk.org. May the Lord continually bless and keep you in his will. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to try to do this without messing up, if I can get this thing to hopefully. It's supposed to go to settings, and I don't know why it won't. Let's see here. Okay, what I'm going to have to do is come a little closer to you. Okay. I love you.